Welcome to War Tech Talks, Eastern Circle's podcast on military technology innovation, its battlefield application in Ukraine, and geopolitical impact. I'm Anastasiya Shapochkina, president of Eastern Circle's think tank in Paris.
And I'm Elitsa Gadeva, journalist and producer of this podcast. In today's episode, we'll talk about how the war in Ukraine has become ground zero for drone innovation.
The war in Ukraine is an improbable mix of World War I trench warfare and a sci-fi movie type of battlefield defined by drones, artificial intelligence, and robotics. Drones are playing a pivotal role on land, in the air, and at sea, monitoring, providing reconnaissance, artillery guidance, and attacking enemy positions thousands of kilometers from the launch site.
Notoriously, Ukrainian naval drones, for example, have disabled a third of Russia's Black Sea fleet and made the rest retreat to Novorossiysk. We have a special episode on that coming up next. At the same time, terrestrial drones perform vital tasks like mining, demining, logistics delivery, and combat search and rescue. We're talking about a full spectrum revolution in how warfare is conducted.
That's right. The speed of scaling up drone production in Ukraine is remarkable. In March this year, Eastern Circles held a conference on drones on the margins of the Paris Defense and Strategy Forum with Ukrainian and French actors. The main theme was how Ukraine was lagging behind Russia in UAV production. Russia was outproducing Ukraine in drones fivefold, which gave it a massive advantage on the front. Just over half a year later, Zelensky's monthly goal for drone production of 87,000 units has been outdone. And the reason for this is a rearmament of Ukraine's industry, powered not only by top-down vision, but also by bottom-up initiatives in DevTech by all company types.
In modern warfare, especially in the Ukrainian context, drones have turned into a critical element, not just a supplementary tool. Repurposing commercial drones for military use has been essential. We're going to unpack all of this today, from the Bayraktar TB2s to kamikaze drones and even the homemade modified DJI quadcopters used both by Russia and Ukraine. It's a new arms race, and whoever controls drone warfare controls the battlefield.
Since the early days of the full-scale invasion, Ukraine's use of drones caught the world's attention. You must remember the Turkish Bayraktar TB2 drones. There was even this song, which had really motivated some of my friends to donate for people's drones. Bayraktar. Bayraktar. They made headlines for their destructive force in the initial months of the conflict.
The Bayraktar, the Turkish-made weapon Ukrainian officials are touting as one of the most effective in their arsenal that's played a part in slowing down the Russian advance.
On May 9, 2022, a Ukrainian Bayraktar TB2, a main combat aerial vehicle, has destroyed one Russian Mi-8 helicopter on the Snake Island.
A Turkish-made Bayraktar TB2 drone corrects Ukrainian artillery fire. Such a drone can aim artillery from long distances without getting into the enemy's.
These medium-altitude, long-endurance drones helped Ukraine push back Russian forces in the spring of 2022. And were even hailed as game-changers at the time. Their supply by Turkey was a pinnacle of 7 years of defense cooperation between Kyiv and Ankara, where the producing company of Bayraktar drones, Baykar, was run by none other than Erdogan's son, underlining the special nature of this geopolitical relationship.
But what special relation are you talking about? Turkey is a strategic ally of Russia, which helps Moscow avoid sanctions, sell oil and natural gas to Europe, and launder Russian money, all the while remaining a NATO member.
All is true, so much so that we are doing a special episode on Turkey later on. Stay tuned.
Now, back to our discussion. In the early days of the war, the Bayraktar TB2 was seen as a symbol of Ukrainian resistance. These drones were used for precision strikes on Russian convoys, artillery, and tanks. But it didn't take long for Russia to adapt. Russian forces began deploying advanced surface-to-air missile systems and radio-electronic warfare to counter the Bayraktars, eventually pushing them out of the battlefield altogether.
That's an important point there. In a lot of ways, the early success of the Bayraktar TB2 gave us a glimpse into how technology could reshape this war. But it also showed the limits of drone warfare when faced with sophisticated countermeasures. Most importantly, it showed how fast technology is becoming outdated in real wartime conditions, which today is a soft underbelly of European defense, which relies on decades of R&D to make a perfect product. Medium altitude drones like the Bayraktar or the Russian Orion have largely been neutralized because of these countermeasures. And that's where the evolution of drone warfare really picks up.
Once it became clear that these larger drones couldn't survive long, both sides prioritized smaller, more flexible drones. We're talking about commercially available UAV drones like the DJI Mavic and Phantom series, which are modified for military use. These drones are inexpensive, readily available, and most importantly, modular and cheap enough to be adapted to the fast-changing battlefield conditions.
The adaptation includes increasing the flight range and autonomy, as well as attaching an explosive to turn commercial drones into military ones, crucial in this war. You'll see them being used for reconnaissance, artillery spotting, and even in direct combat, where they drop grenades, target objects and people using computer vision outside and inside the trenches, or perform other combat-related tasks.
On both sides of the war, these drones have become omnipresent. They are less expensive than their aerial alternatives, easy to operate, and can be deployed in large numbers. Russian ground forces are also heavily relying on these drones.
But the Russian approach to drone production is inherently different from the one Ukraine employs. Based on the centralized production model, Russia chose to concentrate on a few models of aerial drones, like Russian Lancet 1 and 3, which allows scaling faster but slows down the upgrading, which is constantly needed in a defense innovation cycle of 8 weeks. Ukraine's drones production is decentralized, which implies a wide variety of aerial drone models, and as a result, a higher unit cost. But decentralized production also allows for real-time upgrades, unburdened by industrial-scale production constraints.
The key feature of this has been a massive deployment of kamikaze drones. From medium-sized to micro and nano drones, their numbers keep growing. Kamikaze drones aren't like traditional UAVs that return to the base after their mission. They are essentially one-way weapons, carrying a payload and crashing directly into their targets, from artillery units to armored vehicles. For kamikaze drones, Russian drone production has relied on Iranian Shahed strike drones, which have cut through the skies of Ukraine every night for a third year in a row, targeting civilian infrastructure. In addition to the drones produced in Iran, Russia has made its equivalent of Shahed drone Geran 2.
On the Ukrainian side, innovations are key to countering Russian drones. In October, The Telegraph reported that Ukrainian drone maker Wild Hornets is working on an interceptor to hunt down Russia's Shahed and on an FPV drone called the Sting. The Sting could counter Shahed drones through an artificial intelligence targeting system and a pilot, at a higher speed at a fraction of the Iranian drone production cost.
And in addition to domestic production, we are seeing the use of military kamikaze drones like the Switchblade 300 and 600, originally used by the US and British armies. All these drones have become an integral part of artillery military systems, where drones are used for identifying and targeting enemy positions, which are then communicated to artillery operators. Ukrainians have used Uber-type IT systems, which connect the driver with a passenger to communicate between a surveillance drone pilot and an artillery operator. Kropyva is one such example.
But of course, these kamikaze drones have limitations. For example, small kamikazes like FPV drones only carry 1 to 2 kilograms of explosives. By comparison, a 155mm artillery shell carries 15 kilograms of explosives, and a gliding bomb, which the Russians are firing at Ukraine by 100 daily, between 1.5 and 3 tons of explosives. The scale of destruction just isn't the same.
That's why modern warfare has upgraded traditional artillery with drones, making it more effective. Artillery can fire large salvos very quickly, while drone attacks still require manual coordination and are limited by the explosive payload. This is why drones don't have to replace artillery but do complement it.
Russia's major advantage today against Ukrainian drones is its radio-electronic warfare.
Russia has developed a vast array of electronic warfare systems that can jam GPS signals, disrupt communications, and neutralize drones in real time. One of the most effective systems Russia has deployed is the GTEL R330, which can suppress GPS and GSM signals across a wide range of frequencies. This has made it incredibly difficult for Ukrainian drones to operate effectively.
Russia's electronic warfare units are deployed at every tactical level, from division to brigade to army group. They've essentially built a multi-layer electronic warfare wall along the line of contact, complicating drone operations for Ukraine, forcing them to adapt and innovate to overcome this challenge.
And while Ukraine has had some success, they're facing an uphill battle. A lot of Ukrainian armored vehicles and infantry units don't have sufficient electronic warfare systems. In many cases, soldiers or volunteers are buying their own outdated equipment because state supplies are insufficient.
And that's a major issue. To maintain a competitive edge, Ukrainians are developing their radio-electronic warfare systems, where the arms race, especially around frequencies, is very intense between the two sides. Ukraine is also making drone technologies that can resist electronic warfare with computer vision, AI-driven autonomous drones, navigating without a GPS, and non-detectable drones.
It's really a race against time. The battlefield has become transparent, hyperdynamic, and incredibly lethal. One side sees almost immediately what the other side is doing and is reverse engineering every bit of technology that falls on their territory. The old warfare doctrines, what Western armies have trained for, have become obsolete. Now smaller, combined arms assault units operating under protection of electronic warfare, surveillance, and drones are emerging as the new paradigm.
That new paradigm is forcing changes not just in the tactics, but in how military technology is developed and deployed. Even the appearance of military vehicles is changing. Tanks, howitzers, and infantry fighting vehicles are now designed with this drone-dominated battlefield in mind. They're looking more like heavily armored but mobile mini-fortresses, ready to move within minutes after firing a charge, before they will have been detected by the enemy drone and destroyed by enemy artillery, missiles, or other drones.
And we shouldn't forget to mention the pace of innovation. For example, Ukraine has ramped up domestic drone production dramatically, reaching over 90,000 drones monthly in the summer of 2024. Ukraine's President Zelensky has set a goal for the country to produce 1 million drones annually by 2024. That target is on track to be achieved by the end of this year. But the sustainability of Ukraine's DevTech requires significant foreign investment and government orders.
And that's where international partnerships come in. While Western countries are supplying both military and commercial drones, a growing ecosystem of Ukrainian homegrown companies is supplying the bulk of technology, with hundreds of companies engaged in drones production of all types, and hundreds more in the radio-electronic warfare and anti-drone system productions. In addition to the advantages of sovereignty in defense tech, Ukraine equipment is much cheaper than any Western counterpart. Even beyond drones, today, the precondition for Ukraine's defense industry development is stable access to funding and state orders, which are limited by the capacity of Ukrainian state. This is why we're seeing foreign partners without their defense industry, like Denmark, buying Ukraine's own weapons for Ukrainian military use on the front.
Exactly. Ukraine is turning into a major hub for DevTech innovation. There are hundreds of companies producing drones, anti-drone and robotic systems in Ukraine. These companies are experimenting with everything from swarm technology to kamikaze drones with AI targeting systems. However, as we mentioned earlier, scaling up this innovation fast enough to reach a breakthrough on the battlefield remains the challenge. The side that manages to achieve this first will win the war.
as the war drags on, drone warfare will become more central and sophisticated, involving robotic platforms and self-guided swarms with one or no pilot. We're witnessing the dawn of a new era in warfare, where the combination of drones, AI, and electronic warfare is redefining what's possible on the battlefield. This will impact not only Ukraine and Russia. The lessons learned from this war will shape the future of warfare globally. And while Ukraine is pushing the boundaries of drone technology, the question remains: can they innovate fast enough to turn the tide of the war?
And that's where we'll leave things for today. Thank you for joining us on this episode of War Tech Talks.
Stay tuned for more in-depth analysis of the latest developments in modern warfare and military technology and Ukraine.